They didn't die peacefully. They didn't fade into history. They were hunted. 12 ordinary men, chosen by Jesus Christ, witnesses to miracles the world still debates today. But the moment they chose to follow him, their lives were no longer their own. And here's what makes it terrifying. They had a choice. They could have walked away, denied everything, saved their lives, but they didn't. This is not just history. This is sacrifice at its most brutal. This is how the disciples of Jesus were killed. Many people know the names of the disciples of Jesus Christ, but very few know how their lives truly ended. They know Peter as the bold one, John as the beloved one, Thomas as the doubter, Matthew as the tax collector, Judas as the betrayer. But what happened after the resurrection? What became of the men who walked with Jesus, watched him perform miracles, and heard his words with their own ears? Where did they go? How did they die? Why were they hunted? Why were they feared? These were not rich men. They were not generals. They were not kings with armies. They were ordinary men who followed an extraordinary man. They left fishing nets, tax tables, homes, ambitions, and familiar lives to follow Jesus of Nazareth. For 3 years they walked the roads of Judea, Galilee, Samaria, and beyond. They saw blind eyes opened. They saw the lame walk. They watched storms bow to a command. They saw demons flee in terror. They stood near tombs where dead people came back to life. And then, after all they had seen, they watched Jesus arrested, humiliated, crucified, and buried. For a moment, their world collapsed. Then they claimed he rose again. That claim changed them from frightened followers into fearless witnesses. Men who once ran away now stood before rulers. Men who once hid behind locked doors now spoke in public squares. Men who once feared death now faced it. And one by one, many of them paid the price. Judas Iscariot was the first tragedy among them. He had walked beside Jesus just as the others had. He heard the sermons, saw the miracles, and sat at the final meal. Yet somewhere inside him, loyalty gave way to darkness. He agreed to betray Jesus for silver. In the garden, he identified Jesus to the arresting crowd. But when he saw what followed, guilt overwhelmed him. He tried to return the money, confessing he had betrayed innocent blood. Yet sorrow without hope consumed him. He died in despair. His story became one of the most painful in history, not because he failed, but because he never returned to mercy when he still could have sought it. After Judas, the first of the faithful disciples to die was James, the son of Zebedee, brother of John. James had once been fiery and ambitious. He and John had once asked for places of honor beside Jesus, but suffering changed him. Years later, as the church in Jerusalem grew, authorities saw the apostles as dangerous. James was arrested under King Herod Agrippa. He was condemned and executed by the sword. This was not a symbolic punishment. It was public, deliberate, and meant to terrify believers. The authorities wanted to show that anyone preaching Jesus could be silenced. But instead of ending the movement, James became the first apostolic martyr, and his death only deepened the resolve of others. Peter's death carries some of the strongest traditions in Christian history. Peter had once been loud, impulsive, and unstable. He spoke quickly, acted quickly, and once swore he would never abandon Jesus, only to deny him 3 times in one night. Yet Peter became one of the strongest leaders of the early church. He preached boldly in Jerusalem, endured arrests, beatings, threats, and years of danger. Eventually, he reached Rome, where persecution rose under Emperor Nero. Christians were blamed for unrest and disaster. Peter was arrested and sentenced to death. Tradition says he was condemned to crucifixion. But Peter reportedly asked to be crucified upside down, saying he was not worthy to die in the same manner as his Lord. Whether every detail is preserved perfectly or not, The memory of Peter's death remained powerful for centuries. The man who once trembled before a servant girl died refusing to deny Christ before an empire. Andrew, Peter's brother, had always been quieter than Peter, but no less faithful. He was one of the first to recognize something special in Jesus. After the resurrection, Andrew carried the message far beyond familiar places. He preached in regions around Greece and surrounding territories. His ministry drew converts, but it also drew anger. Authorities arrested him and condemned him to crucifixion. Tradition says he was tied rather than nailed, prolonging suffering. Yet stories remembered him continuing to encourage people and speak of Christ even while dying. The man who once simply brought others to Jesus continued bringing others to him until his final breath. Thomas is remembered for doubt, but his later life tells another story entirely. Once he demanded evidence before believing Jesus had risen. Later tradition says Thomas became one of the boldest missionaries of all the apostles. He traveled eastward through dangerous trade routes, eventually reaching India according to ancient Christian communities there. He preached in lands far from Jerusalem, where language, culture, and religion were completely different. He established believers and challenged idols and powerful interests. Opposition rose. Tradition says he was attacked and killed with spears. The same man who once doubted became a man willing to die in a foreign land for the faith he once questioned. Matthew's story is one of deep transformation. Once a tax collector, he had been associated with greed and collaboration with Rome. Many would have despised him before Jesus called him. But after following Christ, Matthew became a messenger of the very kingdom he once ignored. Tradition says he preached in distant regions, carrying the gospel to people who had never heard it. Accounts of his death vary, but many ancient sources remember him dying violently because he refused to stop preaching. Some say by sword, others by spear. Though exact details differ, the pattern is the same. The man who once served earthly power gave his life serving heavenly truth. Philip, known in the Gospels as practical and thoughtful, also met a violent end according to tradition. He preached in cities where idol worship and established religion were deeply rooted. His message threatened old systems and angered leaders. Philip was arrested, publicly punished, and executed. Many traditions say he was crucified. Others say he died after torture. What remains consistent is that Philip did not retreat when danger came. The disciple who once asked for clearer understanding spent his final years giving clarity to others about who Jesus was. Bartholomew, often connected with Nathanael, is remembered in early tradition as a missionary who traveled to difficult and dangerous regions. His death became surrounded by severe martyrdom accounts. Ancient writers differ in the exact details, but many say he suffered brutal execution after refusing to renounce Christ. Whether through beating, execution, or other violence, the message passed down is clear. Bartholomew chose faithfulness over safety. His name may not be the most famous among the 12, but his courage was remembered. James, son of Alphaeus, remains one of the quietest names in the apostolic list. History gives fewer details about him than others, but that silence can hide great faithfulness. Traditions say he continued serving the church and preaching Christ until opposition caught up with him. Some accounts say he was stoned. Others say he was beaten to death. While the exact method cannot be confirmed with certainty, the church remembered him as another disciple who did not abandon the mission when danger arrived. Simon the Zealot had likely once believed change would come through force or political struggle. Yet after following Jesus, his life turned toward another kingdom. Tradition says Simon traveled widely, entering regions where the gospel was unwelcome. Stories of his death differ dramatically, with some saying crucifixion and others violent execution. Though historians cannot settle every detail, the repeated theme is that Simon died under persecution because he would not stop preaching. The former revolutionary died serving a kingdom not built by weapons. Jude Thaddeus, often overshadowed because of the similarity of his name to Judas Iscariot, was remembered as loyal and courageous. He is linked in tradition with missionary journeys into hostile territories. There he preached among people who strongly opposed the Christian message. Ancient accounts say he was killed after refusing to abandon his mission. Some traditions mention clubs or axes. Others simply say he was martyred. Whatever the precise instrument, his story became one of steadfastness in obscurity.
Matthias, chosen to replace Judas after the betrayal, stepped into a difficult place. He inherited the burden of apostolic mission in a season of danger. Tradition says he preached faithfully and later suffered martyrdom as well. Some accounts say stoning, others execution by blade. Like many early witnesses, the exact record is clouded by time, but the memory of sacrifice remained. Then there was John. John's ending was different. He had once been fiery enough to be called a son of thunder, but age transformed him into a voice of love and endurance. He remained near Jesus at the crucifixion when others fled. Later he became a central leader among believers. Tradition says he suffered persecution and exile under Roman rule, being sent to the island of Patmos. There he endured isolation and hardship. Yet instead of dying in execution like many others, John appears to have lived into old age and died naturally in Ephesus. But survival did not mean ease. He lived long enough to bury friends, watch waves of persecution, and carry the memories of nearly every other apostle lost before him. What is most striking is not only how they died, but how they lived before dying. These were men who once argued over status, misunderstood Jesus repeatedly, fled when danger came, and struggled with fear. Yet later they crossed nations, endured prisons, faced rulers, and accepted suffering. Something changed them. Their enemies believed killing leaders would kill the movement. Instead, their deaths became testimonies. Communities remembered their courage. Stories spread. Believers multiplied. The fisherman died with conviction. The doubter died with certainty. The tax collector died with purpose. The revolutionary died with peace. The betrayer died in despair. The beloved disciple died old, but unbroken. The story of 12 ordinary men who followed one extraordinary king still lives. Imagine them all together again. Peter restored. Thomas convinced. John old and smiling. Andrew steady. Matthew redeemed. James honored. The forgotten remembered. The doubters faithful. The weak made strong. And at the center, Jesus. The one they followed by dusty roads. The one they watched die. The one they said conquered death. The one worth living for. The one they believed was worth dying for. And across centuries, one question still echoes. What did these ordinary men witness, that made them willing to lose everything rather than deny it?